Hi, I'm Eleanor, and welcome to this week's episode of the Intuition Lab. It's late October as I record this, and I thought it would be the perfect time to talk about seeing beyond the veil, how to connect with the spirit realm safely if you are so inclined. And this is something that is near and dear to my heart because I was fortunate, yes, fortunate to grow up around people who believed in the validity of there being spiritual presences, ghosts, visits from the beyond, some less than kind and friendly entities, and basically how to deal with all of that and connect if it made sense. So this week I'm going to talk about how to connect, knowing whether or not you had a visitation or otherwise, and talk a little bit about spiritual hygiene if you choose to do this. So I present myself as an intuitive, but I am actually a medium, though I do not do the speaking with dead people part of it for a living. I do get messages from the beyond that come through in my readings, if applicable. You know, a message from a relative or someone in your past who has passed on can be very timely, accurate, helpful, and bring you a lot of peace. So, I'm just going to talk about a few things I have jotted down, no particular order. The first thing I'm going to talk about is knowing whether or not it was a visitation or otherwise. And I'll say, first and foremost, you can feel that person's presence. And I will also mention that sometimes they're just entities that aren't necessarily or weren't a person. But for the purpose of this discussion, let's just suppose it's a person. I would say you can feel the presence of that person, especially if you knew them in life. Everyone has a sort of energetic feel to them. And in a visitation, you will feel that person's presence. I mentioned it a little in my episode 23 about accessing your intuition through a dream state. And also, I did, I believe, episode 22 about dreams per se and receiving information through them. And in that, I talk about me having dreams where I connected with a family member who was deceased and me just feeling that person's presence. You will feel like there is a person with you. I'll also say the encounter feels different. It has a resonance to this, especially in terms of having dreams about someone. People show up in our dreams, both living and dead, but how do we know if it's an actual visitation? Again, it has a resonance to it. You felt like you actually spent time with that person, not just like you saw them in a movie or, in a video or something. It's being with them as opposed to being with something that just looks like them. That's also a good way to know whether or not you're actually connecting with that person or something or someone else. Now, how might you receive information? So, what we've seen on television, it's like an actual vision of that person, which can happen. It especially happens with younger children because they have not had basically the messaging of the world telling them it's not possible. And there are people who remain very open, just full on seeing spirit. And I would say that is in adults is pretty rare, pretty rare. I generally do not see spirit full on. I have seen, people since I've gotten older through the corners of my eyes, but when I was a child, I would see them full on. And who knows, maybe I will retrieve the ability to do so again. But anyhow, that person may appear through scents, sounds, memories, things they loved, and not just in a dream or a vision. You might be thinking about a relative who liked to wear a type of cologne or perfume, or maybe they like to work out and were often sweaty. You might smell that, or you might hear a song they especially liked on the radio, or you might recollect something you had not, like a day out with them that you have not thought about in decades, and you'll feel that person's presence alongside the memory. That's a good way to know. Also, things they loved. So, My grandmother liked a couple types of candy, like butterscotch, the Brax, I think that's how you pronounce it, butterscotch and the Starlight Mints, especially the red and white ones. And sometimes if I see those in places, especially where I would not expect to see them, it feels like a brush with her. And I know that she's around me a good bit of the time. Um, so it's not that out of place for me. Now, when might you feel this presence? I mean, it can happen at any time, but especially between sleep and wake. I'm sorry for any external noise you hear. There's a lot going on today. You might feel it between sleep and wake, that sort of liminal space where your mind is connecting, but it's already off in another realm. Or when you are physically exhausted, like very tired, sick, recovering from illness, and you sometimes feel like you're not quite in your body or you're not as closely bound to the world and what's going on around you. I'll also mention that if you are in a place with less than friendly entities, you have to take special care and be especially energetically protected and grounded when you are sick because it does leave you a little more vulnerable to that sort of, I won't say flat out malevolent, but sometimes needy, sometimes malevolent energetic attachment. Two, I'm going to talk about hauntings, and especially this time of year around Halloween, very popular to go to haunted houses. Some people live for going to haunted houses. I generally give them a wide berth. My MO is to not poke anthills with sticks, but I know some of you out there love that sort of thing. And this is what I have learned and gleaned through my study and also my opinion. So let me know if you feel differently about this. But I think hauntings are less about a specific person, usually, and more about the energetic signature of a place due to what occurred there. So, a good example, I happen to love urbex and abandoned place exploration, but I haven't done a lot of it. I've done some. And what's kept me from doing more is that I can sometimes just feel the energy of a place. Like where I live an easy, like half-hour hike from my house to a place that used to be a massive state mental institution. There are a couple of buildings still left. And I know that lots of people have gone through there in the years since, but even just parts of the property where buildings have been torn down, they do not feel very good to me. So I'm sure lots of things happened there. I've read some books about abuse that went on at that particular institution. It's really upsetting. And even before I read that book by someone who had unfortunately been resident there and talked to other people who were willing to open up about what had happened to them, um, the energetic signature of a place, especially, and this is going to be a little out there, especially if there are certain types of mineral deposits in the ground, they can really hold on to the energetic resonance of what occurred there. So that may well explain a haunting. Some places on Earth are just portals to other realms, other dimensions, and energies and entities might come through. But it's usually more about what happened than a particular person. Sometimes it's almost like if you think of life as a movie, it's like a few scenes just got captured in that space and they keep playing out over and over and over again. I'm not a ghost hunter. I don't work with releasing spirits, and there are many people out there, so go down those rabbit holes, if you will. But that's just my personal opinion about hauntings. That being said, with me seeing it as more of like energetic residue, you need to be exquisitely attuned to places and how they make you feel. If you are house or apartment hunting, or even a place of work, if you go in there, I think you can get a good feel if you're sensitive as to what that place of business is like. Sometimes I used to go to estate sales for my former vintage business, and some homes had a good feel to them. Some were neutral, and some did not feel very good. And I wish I'd been a bit smarter about some of my purchases. So be aware of how you feel in a place. Even if someone tells you nothing untoward happened there, it might not be untoward for them, but if you had an abusive childhood or traumatic background in some way, you can feel the resonance, the energetic residue of people who are angry, people who are abusive, people who may have suffered, mental disturbances in that space. Also, be aware, and I love my vintage, I love antiques, but be very aware of secondhand items and where they come from and the way they make you feel. So this can apply to getting items from family members. And granted, you can physically and energetically cleanse them if you really want the item, but be very aware of how handling an item makes you feel, how your life unfolds after having these items, and if it does not feel right to you, either and you've cleansed them as much as you can, pass them on or destroy them if you feel guided to. And I know that not necessarily everything can be cleansed with burning it, and I know that burning it can be problematic, but some things honestly need to be destroyed. They need to be destroyed. Like I remember years ago looking at I love looking at decor magazines, both in print and online, and someone had obtained beds, these kind of, well, I think they were creepy looking children's beds from an old orphanage, and were using them with their children. I was thinking, what is wrong with this person? I mean, if through the page I could look at these beds and just be weirded out by them and thinking they needed to be hacked up and burned, and there's this person using them with their kids, I don't know. But and if I ever find that reference again, I will share it, and I hope the family turned out okay. So be aware of energetic and spiritual residue. And if you think you are in a place that is haunted, um, you can reach out to me and I can try and get you some resources. But you can do a bit of research on your own online and find out how to deal with it. And do not be afraid to call in reputable help. You can have it blessed by a minister or a priest. And sometimes you need a more thorough energetic cleansing of that space. And sometimes, in extreme cases, it is literally not the space for you. So, moving on, let's talk about the mediumship part of it, i.e., contacting a specific person. Mediums do what I feel is valuable, and if they are kind and compassionate, very healing work. But that work is almost invariably for the living person to deal with their feelings of grief, of hurt, of wanting closure, of wanting connection, and less about the person who is in spirit. But I want you to know a few things about contacting a specific person who's passed on. They will come through if they are ready and if they want to. You cannot dial the dead. No one can guarantee a connection with a specific person. There might be someone you hope will come through and communicate with you either directly or through a medium, but you cannot guarantee it. It's not like making a phone call that you can call this one specific person. You can hope that you will, but nothing is guaranteed. The other thing to know is, what are your intentions around wanting to connect with someone? If it is to obtain closure, I would recommend you investigate ways to do that on your own. If it is dealing with intense grief, I would suggest counseling, either from a therapist or if you are religious, your clergy, or a good friend, or someone who you know is compassionate and can help you walk with grief. It's part of the reason why I don't do professional mediumship, is that I am not great at dealing with my own grief, and I find it difficult to hold space for people who are mourning. And that's me. Perhaps I will develop more of it. It's not that I don't feel compassion for people, but I don't feel like I am the best able to handle that. And I also have a philosophy around contacting the dead that I'll talk about a little more. And sometimes you want to connect with someone because you need information, you need or want information from them. So, as with any spiritual or energetic work, I recommend that you ground, shield, and shed any sticky, angry energy around you first and foremost. And I have a podcast episode that literally talks about that. So if you look through my archive, you will find it. It's called Ground Shield Shed. And know that you can ask your guides, we all have them, for maximum energetic protection around you at all times, which I recommend you do if you're in a difficult living situation or you have to deal with people. You can't just walk away from a situation easily and bless people who are into you should just leave them, you should do this. It is not always possible, it is not always safe to do that. And if you are in that situation, it's a bit of a tangent, but know that I see you, I feel you, and I understand it because it has been part of my life experience. But anyhow, let's say you really want information from the spirit realm, like you want to know where, I don't know, the title to a deceased loved one's car is so you can sell it, right? Or you want to find some information, or maybe you're just working on your own genealogy. There are questions you have about what happened in your family in the past that you want answers to. You don't have to just reach out to great grandma. I believe we're all part of like a great spiritual collective consciousness, both living and dead. And our intuition and our higher self is like an umbilical cord type connection to this, where we can get the information that we need and in turn be nurtured by this great spiritual collective. And also, our physical lived experience feeds into the understanding of this consciousness. And that's just my personal belief. But given that I believe that the sum total of every question that has been asked or will ever be asked is there. The asking the asking the question and the answer is already there. You don't need to rely on one person for this. You can appeal to the great collective consciousness for that information. We are all connected. And the first way to query it is through your intuition and just, what do I need to know? What do I want to know? And maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Can you get this information yourself? And sometimes the answer is yes, like here's where I can go look things up. Or do I need help? And if so, what? So maybe let's say you really need a private detective to find someone. Maybe you do need a medium. Maybe you need someone to help you look things up. You can ask your intuition, what do I need to know? And if you already know that, how can I get the answers I need? And accept that you may not receive an answer because sometimes it's not in our best interests to have this information, or you may not get the answer you want. And that is a very difficult pill to swallow, but you may not get what you want. You may not even get an answer. Sometimes the answer you get is you don't need to know this, and you have to accept that. And I've had that come up for me, asking things about what's happened to me in my life and why, or what happened to family members. And sometimes I would say I usually know what happened, but I am strongly encouraged by my spirit team, by my guides, to not go into the why because it's not necessarily, and it would be painful. If this is in your best interest or the greater good, and you can always ask for clarification, like, is it in my best interest to know this? If not, is it for the greater good? And if it's a no on both parts, then you just have to accept that. And sometimes you can ask again to see if that changes. It might not, right? If that is the case, here is a good way to query that. Please help me find this information in a way that is both safe, accessible, and in a way I can easily interpret. So if you're wanting a sign, you can ask to receive information in a way you can understand, in a way that's easily accessible, so you don't have to travel to some far flung place and go through musty old records. Sometimes you do, most of the time you don't. And also to find this information in a way that is safe, especially if you are dealing with people who are still in the physical realm. You're dealing with information that was dangerous to the person who knew it and may still be dangerous now, would cause a lot of pain and suffering for no good reason. Um, you know, Sometimes when we query things both in this world and in the spirit world, we are poking a hornet's nest. So you need to have good reason for stirring this up. And that goes into my next point. Do you really need to connect to the spirit realm to do this? If you do it with purpose. I would say seances, sessions with mediums are not for fun. They should be taken seriously because, especially if you are working with someone who doesn't have good bedside manner, should we say, or you go into a seance with someone who maybe doesn't understand what they're doing, it can enable energetic attachments. It can be scary. You might be angry if you don't get any information. You should really have a purpose. It's not something you do if you're bored. And I also extend this to DIY methods like Ouija boards, um, scrying, taking hallucinogenic substances. You really, really, really should be very careful. You need to, for things like Ouija boards and even spirit boxes, I'm not a fan of those. I think it is a way to bring through less than friendly entities in most cases, and there are better ways to connect than using these things that just bring through whatever. It's like, I don't know if anyone remembers this, like chat roulette. This is like the chat roulette of the spirit world. You don't want to do it. But in general, in terms of connecting with the spirit realm, I would say don't do it for fun, do it for purpose. Don't do it unless you are energetically protected, you are clear headed, meaning you are not in the midst of a major depressive episode, you are not angry or very, very depressed or very sad. You ideally you want to be on a fairly even keel as much as possible, right? If you're grieving, it's going to be hard to be balanced and calm, but as calm as possible. You must be sober, or if you are actively using, then you need to be in a place where you're able to function and ready, also ready to face what you encounter. You need to have a plan for how you're going to connect, how you're going to keep yourself safe. If you find out something unpleasant or you get a sort of energetic attachment, how are you going to deal with it? And sometimes your plan goes out the window, but it's good to have a checklist. Above all, I would say be sober, be safe with this. Don't invite in trouble. So, if you're at a party and you're drunk, this might not be the time to start playing around with stuff like spirit writing, Ouija boards, stuff like that, you know, spell casting. Do not do it until you are in a balanced, grounded place. And of course, do what you will with this information, but I think this is the cleanest and safest way to connect. If you don't want to do it yourself and you choose to work with a medium, I would also recommend that you be balanced, grounded, know how they work, know how they bring through information, and, see what, if anything, they guarantee. Like, get lots of recommendations, read reviews. And if someone doesn't have many reviews, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't work with them, but you should choose when you're feeling balanced and you should really lean in, trust your intuition. How do you feel about this person? Do you have a good feeling about them? Are you going in because you feel desperate and sad and lonely and at the bottom, at the end of your rope? That is not the time to go reaching out. Also, no money to remove curses. If someone's charging you for that, no one is going to be able to forepay help your loved one in the great beyond. That is scam central. And it's not to say that the people doing this don't have the skill and ability to connect, but let's face it, not everyone who has spiritual skill um, uses it in the best way. Not everyone who is a skilled spiritual practitioner has integrity, so beware. Um, if you just want to connect with a loved one, it can be a one and done deal. I would only say, unless you are working to remove entity attachments, and this should not cost tons of money, you can work with a priest, you can work with a clergy member, anyone who is like charging you tens of thousands of dollars for this, that is not the way. In most cases, connecting, like I said, with a loved one who's passed on or trying to can be a one and done deal. And if you're dealing with energetic attachments, they should have a game plan for this. Not like, oh, well, I can't really tell. Um, they should have an idea of what they're doing. So if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. But finally, know that you can always ask your intuition and your higher self to be pointed to the resources you seek. If you need to know information, you'll get it. Just ask for the signs and be open to receiving them in a safe and healthy way. And if you have more questions about seeing beyond the veil, as it were, please reach out. Let me know what specific topics you are interested in. If you have any questions, feel free to message me and I will try and connect you with the resources that can best help you. In the meantime, I am sending you so much love. Stay safe out there. I hope if you choose to connect, you find the peace and safety and almost, I would say, sanctity that you desire. So until next week, I am sending you so much love, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.